We read the story in the Word of God about Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 3, where Solomon, at a fairly young age, is given the kingdom of his father David. And God comes to him and said, "Because I loved your father David and he was faithful to me in most respects, I will grant you anything that you desire." And Solomon there said the one thing that he wanted more than anything else that God was willing to give him was wisdom. And God was pleased and said, "Because you haven't asked for things, instead you've asked for one of the most important things, wisdom to govern well, I'm going to make you one of the wisest men who ever lived." And I think that's the spirit in which we need to come to this study of wisdom, concerning wisdom in the Word of God. What Solomon wanted more than anything? Wisdom. And because he wanted wisdom, he got all those other things. He's probably one of the most wealthy rulers of God's people ever. He militarily was one of the most successful kings that the children of Israel ever had. He had all those things. He had the palaces. He certainly had a number of wives, 700 wives and 300 concubines. All of the things that he could have asked for, he didn't. He chose wisdom instead. J. Packer says this: "Wisdom is the power to see and the inclination to choose the best and highest goal, together with the surest means of attaining it." In other words, wisdom is to see what's important and then to have the constitution within oneself to go after that, to realize that's most important and to seek it out. And that's the spirit that I hope that we come to the study this morning. Let's turn over to Ecclesiastes chapter 7. We're going to start with verses 10. We're going to read down through verse 29. And we're going to look at it, the first four things that Ecclesiastes tells us. I personally think that Solomon had a lot to do with the writing of Ecclesiastes. And so we're gaining the wisdom from the man who was smart enough to ask for it from God. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 10. "Do not say, 'Why were the old days better than these days?' For it is not wise to ask such questions. Wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter, as money is a shelter, but the advantage of knowledge is this, that wisdom preserves the life of its possessor. Consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy, and when times are bad, consider. God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, a man cannot discover anything about his future. In this meaningless life of mine, I have seen both of these things: a righteous man perishing in his righteousness, and a wicked man living long in his wickedness. Do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked. Do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It's good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. The man who fears God will avoid all extremes. Wisdom makes one wise man more powerful than 10 rulers in a city. There is not a righteous man on earth who does what is right and never sins." Verse 21, "Do not pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you. For you know in your heart that many times you yourself have cursed others. All this I tested by wisdom, and I said, I am determined to be wise. But this was beyond me. Whatever wisdom may be, it is far off and most profound. Who can discover it? So I turned my mind to understand and to investigate and to search out wisdom and the scheme of things, and to understand the stupidity of wickedness and the madness of folly. I find more bitter than death the woman who is a snare, whose heart is a trap, and whose hands are chains. The man who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner she will ensnare. Look, says the teacher, this is what I've discovered. Adding one thing to another to discover the scheme of things while I was still searching, but not finding, I found one upright man among 1,000, but not one upright woman among them all. This only have I found: God made mankind upright, but men have gone in search of many schemes. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his word. I think that we see in Solomon's writing in this passage that from the 700 wives and the 300 concubines, he had a rather negative view of those ladies that were in his life. And he reflects that in his writing there, and we see that. But he does say some things that I think we need to take to heart. He starts off first, we'll go to the first slide here, that wisdom does not look back. You know, I think it's easy for us, it's certainly easy for me. I think I've shared with you that I lost my pension per month is based on some good years, 5 of the best years out of the last 10. And I last year lost the best year that I had in terms of earnings, and that cost me almost $100 a month that I'll get in a pension if there's one still there when I retire. And if I stay at my current occupation and current job until after December, I'll lose my second highest year, and I'll lose another $50 or $60 if I stay where I'm at. And so it's tempting when you see previous years when you were able to work more steady, particularly a lot of us are either partially laid off or fully laid off, to say the good old days were better. Boy, it was great when we could get 6 days a week perhaps to work, or it was better, and things aren't as good now as they used to be. And I appreciated what some very wise person said. It's been said that the good old days are a combination of a bad memory and a good imagination. You know, we tend to think that the days going by were better. It's probably because we don't remember very well and we imagine that things were a lot better than they were. I was reading this work of the week about the fact that people that say, you know, they wish they had lived in a different decade, or that things used to be better, that the 1930s, if you want to pick that decade, was a major time of crime and depression in our country. And if you really knew how tough things were in the 30s, you probably wouldn't change it for today. In the 40s, we were embroiled in World War II, which was a lot worse than the conflicts that we're going through today in some respects. Certainly more people were affected, and there was rationing of gas and all that. Some of you went through that. I certainly never did, but probably wouldn't want to trade this decade for the 1940s. In the 1950s, there were a lot of people that fought in the Korean War. There was the scare that communism was going to overtake the world. There was a fear of nuclear war. I remember in the 50s practicing getting under my desk and bomb shelters and so forth in all the schools in the event that the missiles would start falling. So I'm not sure that I would trade this decade to go back to the 1950s. In the 1960s, we assassinated a bunch of people, including our president, in our country. There was a great deal of unrest, civil unrest in the country. We were burning down Detroit and Los Angeles and a few other places. And so I don't know that I would trade today for the 1960s. There were parts of the 60s that were pretty nice. I grew up, graduated in the 60s, but I'm not sure that it was as good in the good old days as I have a tendency to imagine that it was.